What happens when one of the world's most controversial radio hosts goes head-to-head with British royalty? You won't believe what unfolds when Howard Stern decides to tear into Prince Harry during what was supposed to be a straightforward promotional appearance. The explosive confrontation that erupted live on air last night has left the entertainment world in complete shock, and by the end of this story, you'll understand why Prince Harry stormed out of the studio in absolute fury. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds. The tension was palpable from the moment Prince Harry walked into Howard Stern's Manhattan studio. What started as small talk quickly transformed into one of the most uncomfortable celebrity interviews in recent memory. Stern, known for his no-holds-barred approach, seemed particularly animated that evening, almost as if he'd been waiting years for this exact opportunity to confront the Duke of Sussex. "So, Harry," Stern began with that signature smirk creeping across his face, "let's talk about your new book, Another Tell, all about how terrible your family is." The comment hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Harry's publicist, sitting just outside camera range, immediately tensed up. You could see the prince's jaw clench slightly, but he maintained his composure with that practiced royal smile. "Howard, I think you're mischaracterizing the intent of my work," Harry replied diplomatically, his British accent cutting through the studio's thick atmosphere. "It's about healing, about breaking cycles of—" "Breaking cycles?" Stern interrupted with a laugh that wasn't entirely friendly. "Come on, man, you've made a career out of trashing your own family. Your grandmother barely cold in the ground and you're still out here cashing checks by talking about how awful they all are." The studio fell dead silent. Even Robin Quivers, Stern's longtime co-host, looked genuinely shocked at how quickly things had turned aggressive. Harry's composure began to crack just slightly. His publicist made a subtle gesture toward the exit, but the prince waved her off. "That's not what this is about, Howard. And frankly, I find it quite disappointing that someone of your intelligence would reduce genuine trauma and healing to such a crude interpretation." "Oh, genuine trauma?" Stern leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying himself now. "Let me get this straight. You're traumatized because you were born into literal royalty? Because you had to follow some rules and protocols that literally billions of people would kill for the privilege to experience?" His voice was dripping with sarcasm, and you could see Harry's hands beginning to fidget with his wedding ring. The prince took a deep breath, clearly trying to center himself. "Howard, with respect, you don't understand the psychological impact of—" "The psychological impact of what? Having everything handed to you on a silver platter?" Stern's interruption was sharper this time, more cutting. "Harry, I grew up in a tiny apartment in Roosevelt, Long Island. My dad sold costume jewelry. We had nothing. And you're sitting here telling me about trauma because you had to wear a suit to dinner?" The energy in the room shifted dramatically. Harry's media training was clearly being put to the ultimate test, but cracks were starting to show. "You're being deliberately obtuse, Howard. Mental health struggles don't discriminate based on economic status or—" "Mental health struggles?" Stern repeated mockingly. "Is that what we're calling it when you sell out your own brother on international television? When you throw your father under the bus for Netflix money?" The host was clearly building towards something bigger, his voice getting more animated with each exchange. Harry's face flushed red. "I never sold anyone out. I spoke my truth about—" "Your truth?" Stern exploded with laughter. "Your truth? Harry, let me tell you about truth. Truth is working 3 jobs to keep a roof over your head. Truth is not knowing if you can afford groceries next week. Your truth is complaining about your inheritance while sitting in a $20 million mansion in California." The tension was becoming unbearable. Harry's breathing had quickened, and his carefully maintained royal composure was rapidly deteriorating. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he said through gritted teeth. "The isolation, the constant scrutiny, the complete lack of privacy." "Lack of privacy?" Stern interrupted again, his voice now taking on a mocking, high-pitched tone. "Says the guy who literally put his private life on Netflix for the whole world to see. You sold your privacy, Harry. You packaged it up, put a bow on it, and sold it to the highest bidder." The prince's publicist was now frantically trying to catch his attention, making cutting motions across her throat, but Harry was locked in now. That was about controlling our own narrative, about controlling your narrative by destroying everyone else's? Stern's voice was getting louder, more aggressive. By painting your family as racist monsters while you collect appearance fees? That's your idea of controlling a narrative? Harry stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward. I won't sit here and be lectured by someone who built his career on exploiting people's personal lives for entertainment. His voice was shaking, with barely contained rage. Stern leaned forward, sensing blood in the water. At least I'm honest about what I do, Harry. I don't pretend to be some enlightened humanitarian while I'm cashing checks from telling family secrets. You want to talk about exploitation? Let's talk about how you've monetized your mother's death, your grandmother's funeral, your brother's wedding. Don't you dare bring my mother into this. Harry's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper, and for the first time in the interview, Stern actually looked like he might have gone too far. But instead of backing down, the host doubled down with a malicious grin spreading across his face, setting up what would become the point of no return in this explosive confrontation. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I hit a nerve? Stern's voice took on a sickeningly sweet tone that made everyone in the studio uncomfortable. Your mother, the people's princess, who actually understood what real charity work looked like. She didn't need to do Netflix documentaries about how hard her life was. She just went out there and actually helped people without a camera crew following her around. The color drained from Harry's face completely. His hands were visibly shaking now, and his breathing had become shallow and rapid. You know absolutely nothing about my mother, or what she would have thought about. What she would have thought, Stern interrupted with a cruel laugh. Harry, I think we all know exactly what Diana would have thought about you selling out the family she died protecting. You think she'd be proud of you sitting in California, complaining about how tough you had it while cashing checks from Spotify and Netflix? Robin Quivers finally tried to intervene. Howard, maybe we should. No, Robin, let's talk about this, Stern continued, his voice getting more venomous by the second. Because Harry here has built his entire post-royal career on being the victim, right? Poor little prince who had everything but somehow still got the short end of the stick. Your mother actually faced real problems, real scrutiny, real isolation. And she never once threw your father or your brother under the bus for a payday. Harry was now gripping the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles had turned white. My mother faced relentless harassment from the press, which is exactly what my wife and I experienced. And if you can't see the parallel, your wife? Stern's eyes lit up like he'd just been handed ammunition. Oh, let's talk about Meghan. Because that's really what this is all about, isn't it? You found someone who validated all your complaints about your family. Someone who convinced you that you were the victim in all this. And suddenly, everything became everyone else's fault. The prince shot to his feet again, this time nearly knocking over his chair completely. Leave my wife out of this. She has nothing to do with... She has everything to do with this. Stern was now shouting, his face red with excitement. You were fine being a royal for 30-something years until she came along. Suddenly, your family is racist. Suddenly, the institution is toxic. Suddenly, you need to escape to California and tell everyone how terrible your life was. What a coincidence. Harry's publicist was now standing up, frantically gesturing toward the exit, but the prince was too far gone to notice. You have no right to speak about my family like that. My wife endured things that no one should have to endure, and if you think, what did she endure, Harry? Having to follow protocol? Having to show up to events? Having to represent something bigger than herself? Stern was practically screaming now. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like she endured having to be part of something she couldn't control, and instead of adapting, she convinced you to burn it all down. The studio was in complete chaos now. Camera operators were looking at each other uncertainly. Production assistants were whispering frantically into their headsets, and Robin Quivers was trying unsuccessfully to get Stern's attention. Harry looked like he was about to explode. She endured racist attacks from your precious British press. Harry spat, his voice cracking with emotion. She endured death threats. She endured being completely isolated by an institution that was supposed to protect her. And when we asked for help, When we begged for support, we were told to just deal with it. Racist attacks? Stern leaned forward aggressively. Harry, criticism isn't racism. Asking questions about someone's background isn't racism. Your wife came into the most famous family in the world and immediately started complaining about how unfair everything was. That's not racism, that's accountability. The words hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. Harry's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, and then pure rage. You just proved everything we've been saying. You just proved exactly why we had to leave. Stern wasn't done. You had to leave because you couldn't handle being part of something that wasn't all about you. Your grandmother spent 70 years serving her country without complaint. Your father has dedicated his entire life to duty and service. Your brother is doing the same thing. But you needed to be special. You needed to be the victim. My grandmother understood why we left, Harry shot back, his voice now filled with venom. She supported our decision because she knew what we were facing. She knew the institution was failing us. Your grandmother was probably heartbroken, Stern replied coldly, watching her grandson throw away everything she spent her life building so he could go play celebrity in America. You think she was proud of you doing Oprah interviews trashing the family? You think she enjoyed watching you air dirty laundry on international television? The emotion was too much for Harry now. Tears were forming in his eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of pure, unbridled fury. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know anything about my family, about what we went through, about the impossible situation we were put in. Impossible situation? Stern's voice was dripping with contempt. Harry, you were born into the most privileged position on earth. You had every advantage, every opportunity, every door opened for you. And because you couldn't handle a little criticism, because your wife couldn't handle not being the center of attention, you threw it all away and then had the audacity to blame everyone else. Harry was shaking with rage now, his carefully constructed media persona completely shattered. We tried to make it work. We tried to serve. We tried to be part of the institution, but they made it impossible. They leaked stories about us. They refused to protect Meghan from abuse. They treated us like we were disposable. Disposable? Stern laughed harshly. Harry, you made yourself disposable. You chose to be disposable. You had the chance to be part of something historic, something meaningful, and you chose to cash out instead. You chose money and celebrity over duty and service. The confrontation had reached a fever pitch. Harry was now pacing behind his chair, his hands running through his hair frantically. You have no idea what real service looks like. You sit behind this microphone making jokes and attacking people, and you think that gives you the right to judge how others choose to live their lives? Stern stood up now too, matching Harry's aggressive energy. I know what real work looks like, Harry. I know what it's like to build something from nothing, to earn everything you have. I didn't inherit my success. I didn't have it handed to me by accident of birth. Everything I have, I earned. Can you say the same? The question hit Harry like a physical blow. His face contorted with a mixture of hurt and rage that was painful to watch. You think I haven't earned anything? You think serving in Afghanistan, working with veterans, supporting mental health causes, you think none of that matters because I was born into the royal family? I think it's a lot easier to be charitable with other people's money, Stern replied with devastating calmness. I think it's a lot easier to support causes when you've never had to worry about paying rent or putting food on the table. Your charity work, your military service, all of it was cushioned by the safety net of unlimited wealth and privilege. Harry stopped pacing and stared directly at Stern, his eyes blazing with an intensity that made everyone in the studio uncomfortable. You want to know what I've earned? I've earned the right to protect my family from the same system that killed my mother. I've earned the right to choose my own path instead of being trapped in a golden cage for the rest of my life. The mention of his mother, again, seemed to trigger something even darker in Stern, and his response would push this confrontation past the point of no return, setting up the dramatic explosion that would end with Harry's furious exit from the studio. Your mother didn't choose to leave, Harry, Stern said with ice-cold precision. she didn't have the luxury of running away to California when things got tough. She stayed and fought, and she died fighting. You just ran away and turned it into a business opportunity. The words hit Harry like a sledgehammer to the chest. His face went completely pale, then flushed deep red with rage. "How dare you?" he whispered, his voice trembling with barely contained fury. "How dare you use her death to make some sick point about my choices?" Stern wasn't finished. "I'm not using her death, Harry. I'm using her life, her courage, her commitment. Everything you abandoned the moment things got a little uncomfortable for your wife. Diana would be ashamed of what you've become." That was it, the final straw. Harry exploded with a rage that seemed to surprise even himself. "Get her name out of your mouth!" he screamed, his voice cracking and echoing through the studio. "You don't get to talk about my mother. You don't get to compare anything I've done to what she went through." The studio erupted in chaos. Production assistants scattered, camera operators instinctively stepped back, and Robin Quivers looked genuinely frightened by the intensity of Harry's reaction. But Stern, feeding off the drama like a vampire feeds on blood, pushed even harder. "Your mother faced real adversity with dignity," Stern continued relentlessly. "She didn't go crying to Oprah. She didn't sign deals with streaming services. She didn't write tell-all books. She fought her battles with class, something you clearly never learned." Harry was now hyperventilating, his hands shaking uncontrollably. "She fought those battles alone. She had no support, no protection, and they killed her for it. They hounded her to death. And you want me to just accept that same fate for my family?" "They didn't kill her, Harry." Stern shot back with devastating cruelty. "A drunk driver killed her. But you've built your entire victim narrative around blaming everyone else for a tragic accident." The accusation was so shocking, so completely beyond the pale, that even Stern's own production team looked horrified. Harry stood frozen for a moment, his mouth opening and closing like he couldn't find words for the magnitude of what he'd just heard. "You sick, twisted." Harry's voice was barely human now, more like an animal in pain. "You absolute monster! How can you sit there and say that? How can you reduce her death to some convenient talking point?" Stern realized he might have finally gone too far, but his ego wouldn't let him back down. "I'm just stating facts, Harry. Your mother died in an accident. Everything else is conspiracy theories and victimhood that you've used to justify abandoning your responsibilities." "Facts?" Harry roared, slamming his fist down on the armrest of his chair so hard it cracked. "You want facts? Here's a fact. You're a pathetic, washed-up shock jock who gets his kicks from tormenting people in pain. Here's another fact. You've spent your entire career exploiting human misery for ratings." The prince was now completely unhinged, years of bottled-up rage pouring out in a torrent of fury. "You want to talk about my mother? My mother tried to reform the monarchy from within. She tried to make it more human, more compassionate, more relevant, and they destroyed her for it. They leaked stories, they turned the press against her, they isolated her completely." Stern tried to interrupt, but Harry was beyond stopping now. "And when I saw the same thing happening to my wife, when I saw them using the same playbook, the same tactics, the same cruel machinery designed to destroy anyone who threatens their control, I said no. I said I won't watch another woman I love be destroyed by this institution." "So you ran away," Stern interjected weakly, clearly realizing the interview had spiraled completely out of his control. "I protected my family," Harry screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. "I did what my father couldn't do for my mother. I did what no one in that family has ever had the courage to do. I chose love over duty. I chose my wife and children over a broken system that chews people up and spits them out." The raw emotion in Harry's voice was overwhelming. Even the hardened camera operators were visibly moved by the prince's breakdown. Stern, perhaps for the first time in his career, looked genuinely uncomfortable with what he had unleashed. "Harry, maybe we should." Robin tried to intervene again. "No." Harry whirled around to face her. "Let him finish. Let him tell me more about how my mother would be ashamed of me." Let him explain how protecting my family makes me a coward. Let him reduce 37 years of my life to sound bites for his sick entertainment. Stern, sensing he was losing control of his own show, tried one last desperate attack. Your family? Harry? Your real family is back in England, dealing with the mess you left behind. Your real family is your father, who's now king and has to clean up the damage from your public tantrums. Your real family is your brother, who's had to carry the weight you abandoned. The words seemed to hit Harry like physical blows, but instead of breaking him further, they seemed to crystallize his rage into something cold and focused. When he spoke again, his voice was deadly quiet. My real family, he said slowly, deliberately, is my wife and my children. My real family is the people who love me for who I am, not what I represent. My real family doesn't leak stories to the press about me. My real family doesn't use me as a scapegoat for their own failures. He turned to face Stern directly, his eyes blazing with contempt. And you? You're not family. You're not even human. You're a parasite who feeds on other people's pain. You're everything that's wrong with this world, someone who profits from cruelty and calls it entertainment. Stern, clearly stung by the personal attack, made one final attempt to regain control. At least I'm honest about what I do, Harry. I don't pretend to be saving the world while I'm cashing. Shut up, Harry exploded one final time. I'm done with you. I'm done with this sick charade. I'm done pretending that people like you deserve any respect or consideration. The prince grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair and headed toward the studio exit, his security team scrambling to keep up. But before leaving, he turned back one last time, his face a mask of pure disgust. You know what the real tragedy is, Howard? My mother actually cared about people like you. She would have sat here and tried to find the humanity in you, tried to understand what made you so cruel. But I'm not my mother. I don't have her patience for bullies and parasites. With that, Prince Harry strode out of the studio, leaving behind a stunned silence that seemed to stretch on forever. Stern sat frozen in his chair, clearly shaken by the intensity of what had just transpired. The cameras kept rolling, capturing the aftermath of what would undoubtedly go down as one of the most explosive celebrity interviews in television history. Robin Quivers finally broke the silence. Well, she said weakly, I think we're going to commercial. As the studio lights dimmed and the crew began the process of damage control, one thing was crystal clear. This confrontation had revealed something raw and primal about both men, and the entertainment world would be talking about this explosive encounter for years to come.